Welcome to my channel. This is your host. And today's scary story comes from our community member, The Forgotten House. I was 18 at the time and stupid, adventurous, a combination that never ends well. It was summertime, the middle of August, when we heard about an old abandoned house on the outskirts of town that was rumored to be haunted. Of course, being young and stupid, we decided to go check it out. It was an old Victorian-style house with peeling paint and dead weeds in the yard. We didn't know anyone who lived there or even had lived there. No one in town seemed to know much about it, only that it had been empty for years and that the previous owner had mysteriously disappeared. Apparently no one had entered the house in almost 2 decades. So, needless to say, we were pretty scared but excited to see what would happen. We climbed over the rotting porch railing and walked inside. Dust covered everything. There was a grand staircase leading up to the second floor and long hallways everywhere. At the end of one of the hallways was a door with the biggest keyhole I'd ever seen. My friend put his skeleton key in it and turned it. A musty breeze swept through the room we entered and sent shivers down our spines. All the windows in this room were boarded up. At the far end of this room was another door. This one was locked, but it looked like the doorknob was fairly new. We walked back into the hallway and turned off our flashlights to increase the creepiness factor. That's when we heard it. A loud bang, like someone dropping something heavy, followed by footsteps near where the other door was. My friend and I stared at each other in the darkness for a moment until he said, "I'm sure it was just some animal." He picked up his pace and hurried out of the room. I followed close behind him. When we got back into the entryway, we found a small wooden box with a lid that was slightly ajar. Inside the box, nestled on a bed of yellowed velvet, was an old silver pocket watch. It was ornate and beautiful. The second hand ticked rhythmically, and the face of the watch seemed to glow faintly in the dark. I knew I should leave it there, but it had probably been so long since anyone had touched it that I could not resist picking it up. As soon as my fingers brushed against the cool metal, I felt a sudden surge of icy energy. A draft swept through the room, making me drop the watch. It landed face down on the floor with a hollow sound. As I bent to pick it up, I could have sworn I heard a whisper saying, "Don't go." But it could have been my imagination playing tricks on me. With the adrenaline pumping through my veins, I quickly pocketed the watch and ran after my friend. I didn't want to stay in that house any longer than I had to. We got outside just as quickly as we could, and did not look back until we were a safe distance away. Once we were in my car, my hands were shaking so badly that it took me several attempts to get the keys into the ignition. I started the engine and floored it, practically flying over the lawns as I drove away from the house. I didn't stop until I was several miles away from the creepy house. And then the weird things started happening. First, my cell phone, which had been dead when I left the house, suddenly turned on. Then the radio began playing on its own. It was tuned to a station I'd never heard of, and it was broadcasting in a language I didn't understand. I tried changing the station, but it was stuck on that one, and all I could hear was whispering in a language that sounded ancient and evil. That's when I noticed the passenger side window was fogging up as if someone had just breathed on it. Then a cold hand brushed against my arm. I screamed and slammed on the brakes. I looked around, but there was no one there. And when I turned to look back at the window, it was clear again. I forced myself to take a deep breath and try to calm down. Maybe it really had just been a branch or some other natural explanation. But as I continued driving, the strange occurrences didn't stop. The radio began speaking in a low, guttural voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It said, "Give me back what you have taken. Give me back the watch." My blood ran cold, and I hugged the steering wheel. I didn't respond, of course. What could I have possibly said? Suddenly the car lurched violently as if someone had slammed on the brakes, even though I hadn't touched them. The windows began to rattle, and the entire car shook with such force that I feared it might stall. Then, just as abruptly as it began, it stopped. I pulled over and got out of the car. my legs shaking so badly that I nearly collapsed. I stumbled to the nearby trees and threw up my hands in a panic, screaming for help. No one answered, of course. When I finally got back into the car, it was silent. The whispers were gone and the radio was tuned to a static-filled country music station. I turned it off and sat there for a moment, trying to calm down before continuing my journey home. I drove slowly and cautiously, keeping an eye on the windows and listening intently for any sign of the disembodied voices. But nothing happened, and eventually I arrived home without incident. I haven't spoken to my friend since that day, but I often wonder if he too heard those whispers and felt that cold touch. I can still remember the icy grip of fear that held me as I raced away from that house. Sometime later, I heard that the house had been demolished and the town seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief when the overgrown weeds were cleared from the yard and the ramshackle structure was reduced to rubble. But for me, the memory of that day and the chilling encounter with the unknown remains as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. The whispers still echo in my ears, and the cold touch sends shivers down my spine. It's a reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, and some secrets are better left buried in the past. And that is The Forgotten House, a scary story from our community member, The Forgotten House. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, be sure to share your story with us through the link in the description below.